Hi, this is Rudy Jones, and welcome to the Palmetto State Baseball Podcast for April 27th, 2023. This is just part of my coverage of college baseball in the state of South Carolina. I operate PalmettoStateBaseball.com, a website covering college baseball. I post a daily schedule and score list there, as well as news and notes. I also post a video wrap-up each Sunday night at PalmettoStateBaseball.com and on my YouTube channel. Also on Sundays, I have Team of the Week award as well as rankings for all 33 state teams. You can also follow my news and information at Palmetto Base on Twitter. If you like my podcast and other coverage of college baseball in South Carolina, please become a follower and invite others to listen to and to like the podcast too. Listener interaction helps me determine if I'm doing this for anyone other than myself. First off, there's some good news for the sport of baseball in South Carolina. Earlier this month, Clinton College, an HBCU in Rock Hill, announced it plans to add baseball and several other sports to its athletics program. That will give the state 34 college baseball programs. Meanwhile, Furman University, no, they didn't bring baseball back, but they did decide that a Furman-branded bourbon would be a good idea for a school founded to educate people for the ministry. Maybe they can build the distillery where Latham Stadium currently sits. Last weekend was a good one for a lot of state schools on the field. In last week's podcast, I mentioned South Carolina needed to start winning some head-to-head series against teams it is contending with for national seed status. The Gamecocks did just that with the sweep of Florida. USC now sits solidly among the top 8, but still needs to close the deal. Clemson began an important stretch of ACC series with a sweep at NC State. The Tigers are now back in the NCAA tournament discussion. This week's projections by D1Baseball.com has Clemson in the field, while Baseball America's projection has the Tigers as one of the last 4 out. At 99 in the ACC, the Tigers would likely be a lock for the tournament by going 6-6 in its final 12 conference games. Coastal Carolina won 2 of 3 in a Sun Belt Conference series against Southern Mississippi. The Chanticleers are 2 games up on the Golden Eagles and 3 games ahead of 5 other teams with 4 weekends remaining. It ought to be an interesting finish in the Sun Belt. Wofford won 2 of 3 over Samford to move into a first-place tie with the Bulldogs in the conference in Southern Conference, and Mercer is also tied for first. Winthrop and USC Upstate got sweeps, and Charleston Southern won 2 of 3 in Big South Conference series last weekend. Presbyterian lost 2 of 3 to Gardner-Webb, but is still solidly in the Big South tournament chase. College of Charleston swept a non-conference series with Western Carolina, but it returns to the CAA, Colonial Athletic Association, schedule this weekend with an important stretch going on. In Division II, Newberry clinched the South Atlantic Conference regular season championship and swept Lenore-Ryan. The conference has a new tournament format this season. A pair of 4-team tournaments will be played on campus sites, with the 2 winners going to a best-of-3 series in Kodak, Tennessee to determine the conference championship in early May. Newberry and Wingate are hosting the tournament preliminaries beginning Friday. Anderson qualified for the SAC tournament and will play Wingate in the first round. Limestone had a lead late in its Sunday game it may have been Saturday, game with Carson Newman and lost, finishing a tie for 8th place. However, the Saints were in a head-to-head tie with Tusculum and lost based on a 2-1 Tusculum win in the series. Still, 19 wins for Limestone is a great improvement over the 4 wins of a season ago. North Greenville had already clinched the Conference Carolina's regular season title and is assured of the top seed for the tournament. The Crusaders got the 41st win of the season earlier this week, and they close out the regular season against Southern Wesleyan this weekend. In the Peach Belt Conference, USC Aiken lost 2 of 3 against Georgia College, but actually moved into a tie with Georgia Southwestern for first place because previous leader Young Harris was swept by a red-hot Lander team. In NJCAA Region 10, Florence Darlington Tech wrapped up the top seed for the tournament, beginning May 5th in Lexington, by winning 3 of 4 games against second-place Gaston College. The Stingers will advance to the East District Tournament later in May automatically, regardless of how they do in the tournament. However, a second Region 10 team will go to the East District Tournament. They will either be the tournament champion of the Region 10 or the runner-up if Florence Darlington Tech wins the tournament too. With last weekend out of the way, how about earlier this week? There are fewer midweek games this time of year. Sometimes it's because the Division II schools have finished up their schedules, and also sometimes it's because the Division I schools are in exam times. During this middle of the week, run rule games were numerous. Clemson roared back to beat Kennesaw State by run rule. Wofford got a pair of run-rule wins over at UNC Asheville and Davidson. A surprising rout was a Wake Forest 11-1 win over Coastal Carolina in a meeting of the number 2 and number 6 teams. The Demon Deacons jumped ahead early and just poured it on. Of course, that doesn't necessarily mean that Wake's that much better than Coastal. Those games just happen sometime. As you know, the old saying goes, that's baseball. Also this week, Bob Jones snapped an 11-game losing streak with a win over Brevard. Other midweek winners included College of Charleston, Lander, Presbyterian, the Citadel, USC Aiken, and Winthrop. Before heading on to this coming weekend, let's look at some conference races. South Carolina's sweep of Florida moved the Gamecocks into the top spot in the East and overall in the Southeastern Conference. Carolina's climb was helped by Georgia's sweep of Arkansas and Tennessee's sweep of Vanderbilt. The Gamecocks are a half game ahead of Vandy, a game in front of LSU, and 2.5 games ahead of Arkansas, Florida, and Kentucky. Finishing in the top 4 in the SEC is important because those 4 teams avoid the single elimination opening round in Hoover, Alabama in May. Series for those contenders this weekend include Auburn at Carolina, Alabama at LSU, Kentucky at Vanderbilt, Missouri at Florida, and Texas A&M at Arkansas. That A&M Arkansas series starts on Thursday, by the way. In the Atlantic Coast Conference, Clemson is tied for 7th place overall after being 13th just a few weeks back. The Tigers are also 4th place in the Atlantic Division, but they're 6 games behind Wake Forest, a team that swept them already. But 2nd place Boston College is just 1.5 games ahead of the Tigers, ending a head-to-head meeting this weekend in New England. Notre Dame has a half-game edge on Clemson. Duke has a 4-game lead on, Wake Forest has a 4-game lead over Coastal Division leader Duke in the race for the top seed overall in the conference tournament. In addition to Clemson at BC, key ACC series this weekend include Miami at Louisville, Duke at Virginia, and North Carolina at Virginia Tech. The Miami-Louisville series begins on Thursday. In the Sun Belt Conference, Southern Miss's win in the series finale at Coastal Carolina last weekend kept the Chanticleers from taking a 4-game lead, which would have been pretty sizable at this point of the season. The Chants play at Louisiana, one of the 5 teams that's 3 games behind Coastal, this weekend. The Texas State Old Dominion series is the only other head-to-head matchup involving teams in the top 7 in the Sun Belt. As I mentioned earlier, Wofford, Sanford, and Mercer share first place in the SoCon, with VMI 1.5 games back. Sanford is at VMI in the only head-to-head meeting of current contenders this weekend. In the Colonial Athletic Association, College of Charleston is a game behind UNCW, a half game, I think it should be a game and a half behind Eastern. No, I'm sorry, right. Game behind UNCW, half game behind Northeastern, and a game ahead of Elon. The Cougars play host to Elon this weekend, while UNCW is at Hofstra. And excuse me for sometimes getting confused because I'm trying to kind of wing this. In the Big South Conference, Campbell has a 2.5 game lead over USC Upstate and a 4-game edge over Gardner-Webb. Upstate is the only one of those with a conference series this weekend. The Spartans play host to Presbyterian. In Division II, the Peach Belt Conference, Young Harris at 21-9 has already completed its conference schedule and is .004 percentage points behind USC Aiken and Georgia Southwestern, who are both 19-8. USC Aiken has Lander this weekend. Georgia Southwestern has Flagler. The prospects remain for an outright champion for any of the teams, as well as a 2-way or 3-way tie. Georgia Southwestern went 1-2 against Young Harris, 2-1 against USC Aiken. USC Aiken went 1-2 against both opponents. On to this weekend. It looks like rain could be a factor in scheduling again. Stay tuned. As I mentioned earlier, Clemson has an important series at Boston College, which is 28-12 overall, 12-9 in the league. The Tigers are 26-16 overall, 9-9 in the ACC. They've won 4 straight, 6 of their last 7, and 9 of their last 11. They also have a 5-game winning streak in the ACC, and their 6-game road winning streak is the longest active one among Power 5 teams. The return of Ryan Ammons adds depth to the pitching staff, although it appears he will remain in the bullpen for now. Billy Amick and Cam Canarella are both hitting .400 for Clemson, while Cooper Engel, Will Taylor, Benjamin Blackwell, and Caden Grice have all been key offensive contributors lately. Grice also has been increasingly effective as the number 3 starter in the weekend rotation. Boston College swept North Carolina in Chapel Hill last weekend as in the discussion for a regional host. In Columbia, South Carolina at 34-6 overall, plays for the first time since the Florida sweep. Coach Mark Kingston said on Thursday that first baseman Gavin Casas should be available after missing 2 games against Florida with a lung injury. Third baseman Talmadge LaCroix is expected to be available for pinch hit duty after missing the Florida series with a hamstring injury. With Noah Hall still out, Matthew Becker will again join Will Sanders and Jack Mahoney in the starting rotation. Auburn is 23-1 and has won 2 of 3. Auburn is 23-17-1 and has won 2 of 3 over Mississippi State last weekend. In the Sun Belt, as I mentioned, Coastal Carolina at 26-13 overall is at Louisiana. Louisiana likes to run. They've got 116 steals, and they lead the Sun Belt in ERA at 4.75. Also, as I mentioned earlier, College of Charleston is at home against Elon. The Elon is a good team. The Phoenix have wins over Campbell, Kentucky, NC State, and Wake Forest already this season. In the Big South, as I mentioned, USC Upstate is at home against Presbyterian, while Charleston Southern and Winthrop have the weekend off. Both the Citadel and Wofford step away from the Southern Conference this weekend. The Bulldogs are at NC State for 3 games, while Wofford has single games against Wake Forest on Saturday and High Point on Sunday, both in Winston-Salem. In NCAA Division II, Newberry placed host to one of the 2 4-team pods in the South Atlantic Conference Tournament. The Wolves meet Tusculum at 6:30 p.m. Friday. Lenore Ryan and Carson Neiman meet at 3 in the opener of that pod. Anderson will be playing Wingate at 6:30 in Wingate, North Carolina, in that pod. In the Peach Belt Conference, USC Aiken plays host to Lander. And Lander's the hottest team in the state. Maybe they won 5 straight. Claflin is at North Georgia, and USC Beaufort is at Augusta. The Pacers merely need to do better than both Georgia Southern and Southwestern this weekend to take the regular season title in the Peach Belt. Conference Carolinas play winds up with Southern Wesleyan at North Greenville and Emmanuel at Erskine. Francis Marion is idle. Columbia International completes the conference series at Point in West Point, Georgia, with a Friday doubleheader. Benedict has the Southern Intercollegiate Athletic Conference Series at Kentucky State, while Morris and Voorhees square off for a Saturday doubleheader in Denmark. Bob Jones, coming off his first win in a month, has single home games against Mid-Atlantic Christian Friday night and Saturday afternoon at Conisty Park in Greenville. The junior college regular season is over for Region 10, but USC Salkehatchie and Florence Darlington Tech are going to play a doubleheader Saturday that counts only in the conference standings. Overall standings. As has quite often been the case this weekend, weather issues could affect schools and the schedule. For particulars on times and date, check PalmettoStateBaseball.com. I'll also provide weather-related updates as soon as I can, either on the website or at Palmetto Base at Twitter. This is the 13th podcast of the 2023 season. If you like this podcast, please follow and share a link with your baseball fan friends. If you like PalmettoStateBaseball.com's coverage of college baseball in South Carolina, please let me know. Email me at rudyjones@PalmettoStateBaseball.com with comments, criticisms, or suggestions. Or you can comment on any post on the website, or you can comment on any of my tweets on Twitter. If you see me at a game, please come say hi. As always, I'd like to invite anyone in the Greenville area of South Carolina to come worship with me at Reedy River Baptist Church, 871 North 25 Bypass between Travelers Rest and the Furman University Golf Course. Worship time is 10:30 a.m. on Sundays. Our worship style is mostly traditional. Our pastor is the Reverend Josh Slatton. If you live in the Columbia area, visit Woodfield Park Baptist Church at 1834 Morning Glow Lane off I-77 near Fort Jackson. My friend Jeff Phillips is the pastor there, and Sunday morning worship starts at 11 a.m. If you talk to him real nice, he might share his homemade catfish stew with you. Thanks again for listening to the April 27th episode of the Palmetto State Baseball Podcast. This is Rudy Jones of PalmettoStateBaseball.com saying, it's a beautiful day for baseball. Let's play too.